This is Back Roads of Illinois server to farmers and ranchers in central Illinois and the Midwest. Today's edition of Back Roads of Illinois. We were bringing you lasted for farming sources and information sponsored by AgriGold. We were glad you're here on today. I am Cesar Delgado on today. This summer was pretty warm and humid. Anyway, the fall is dry more than average. We were talking about that with Trent Ford State Climatology in Champaign. We were going to talk with John Heinberg from Total Farm Marketing. This is Back Roads of Illinois server to farmers and ranchers in central Illinois and the Midwest. This summer was pretty warm and humid. Anyway, the fall is dry more than average. We were talking about that with Trent Ford State Climatology in Champaign. Trent, how are you?
Yeah, I'm doing good, Caesar. Good to talk with you. And yeah, definitely done with the warmer temperatures. We definitely had a warm one this summer.
Trent, let's discuss about the fall weather. What is your prediction of the weather for this fall in Illinois?
Yeah, well, so far, it's been pretty warm. We've had going back to the beginning of September, temperatures have been between 5 and 10 degrees above normal statewide. And we had, I think, a top 15, top 20 warmest September on record. October has sort of followed suit, although we finally started to see a little bit of some cooler weather. Over the next week or so, we're going to likely see a little bit of cooler weather. It'll at least feel cooler. It'll actually be pretty close to where we should be normally, but it'll feel cooler. Beyond that, honestly, it does show most of the outlooks for the end of October, stretching into November, all show best chances of above average temperatures. So it's likely that we will continue this milder streak. Now, it's always important this time of the year that when we talk about above and below normal temperatures, that normal is dropping. We're transitioning to the colder time of the year. So every week that goes by, our normal temperature gets a little bit cooler. So even highs in the 60s this time of year can be above normal, even though, of course, they'll feel quite comfortable. So, what that really means is we'll probably get a pretty mild, if not comfortable, end to October, start to November, and likely, really feel like fall, which is really nice.
Do you have any concerns about this winter? Maybe we could have cooler weather on December and January.
Yeah, that's a big question. No real concerns about the winter. In fact, I would if I were to have it my way, I would actually prefer a little bit of a colder winter. Um, with a lot of precipitation too. Right now we're in a La Nina, or we're heading towards a La Nina pattern that in the wintertime, if the atmosphere sort of follows suit with that La Nina effect, can paint us a little bit cooler, a little bit wetter than normal. And what that really can help with is ongoing drought. We have drought that's expanding all across the state, particularly bad here in central Illinois. And we need that wetter weather during the winter to recharge the soil profile, bring up those water table levels. And so, even though the folks who don't really like winter in Illinois would prefer a milder, warmer, maybe drier winter, we actually need what we really need is a cold, dreary, cloudy, wet winter to really get us back on track as far as moisture before we hit the spring.
Of course, I hope that it's not have minus 30 degrees.
Yeah, we can be cold, but not that cold. Yes, exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Mm.
How inches of rain in central Illinois with the warm weather?
Yeah, it you know the the warm weather has definitely played a role in making our drought conditions worse. And we've seen this lack of precipitation a lot of places in September and the start of October, only getting maybe a quarter to a half inch of rain across central Illinois. Fortunately, I mentioned the forecast, and then in the near term, the next 7 days is actually looking pretty bullish for rain, even across really across much of the state, which is really great. And so, if we can catch not just, an inch of rain in some isolated pockets, but an inch to 2 inches of rain across much of the state, that'll really go a long way to helping stream flow conditions. But certainly, it's not going to take us out of drought. We're going to need prolonged periods, weeks to months of wetter than average conditions to get us out of drought. But it can definitely kind of stave off some of the issues. And then one of the other, I know we talked about rivers, but one of the other issues I want to mention was fire. A lot of field fires going on over the last couple of weeks as harvest is in full swing. And it really just getting a little bit of rain, even a quarter, half inch of rain can tamp down that fire risk, which is going to be really important as we continue to see harvest progress.
Did you see some rain in Peoria for Bloomington on June?
Um, so when let me see here for how much rain fell um across central Illinois, we did get a decent amount of rain in June and July across central Illinois. In fact, that was one of the only kind of near to wetter than normal months over the last 6 to 9 months. And I will say that, the drought that we've been talking about for this year has definitely had a different characteristic than previous droughts that have been really impactful for ag. So we think back to 2012. That was a year where the drought was really at its worst in the middle of the growing season, June into July, and really took a really significant toll on corn and beans because of that. Um, this year we were a little bit wetter in July and then to a lesser extent June before the drought really took hold in August and September. So some of the late planted beans, especially, did see have at least I've heard reports of yield, well below expectations on the late planted beans. But some of the earlier planted stuff has actually done pretty well. And so the timing of the drought has meant that although ag impacts have definitely been there, especially for the late planted beans, they have been more limited than other droughts like 2012 and 1988. So for this drought that's ongoing, it's really more of an issue of fire, of water levels in reservoirs and rivers, like we talked about. And then also one thing I didn't mention is pasture.
Uh,
Folks were maybe only able to get to, boy, if they were lucky, maybe 3 cuttings of hay this year. I've heard from some folks in Southern Illinois that were only able to get one. That's really not great. And so the lack of regrowth after late July in pasture has been an issue for livestock producers.
Of course, I remember that in 2012 I was in high school in my freshman year.
Yeah, and it was really something. It was a bad year. It was about as bad as a 1 year drought you could draw up for agriculture, where it was so hot, so many days above 100 degrees, and just bone dry through the critical pollination and periods for both corn and soybeans. It just anything unirrigated just simply didn't produce. So we didn't get that this year, thankfully. It's been more of the end of season drought, which, like I mentioned, has been more of a hydrological issue, water supply.
Do you have any final thoughts on the winter?
So if La Nina does play its role, kind of to type. it likely brings us a little bit more active storm track through winter through the Ohio Valley. That doesn't necessarily mean more snow, I hope, but it could just mean more precipitation overall. That's really what the doctor ordered for drought. So not to say that that's guaranteed to happen, because we've seen La Nina years, even recently, that have been drier on the dry side. But what we really need as we transition into late November, December, and then of course into the new year, is wetter conditions, active storm track, good amount of snow, some winter rain, melt into unfrozen soils to really recharge that soil moisture layer so they don't carry this drought into the spring season. As far as temperatures in the winter are concerned, again, if La Nina plays the type, could paint us a little bit colder. But winter's tough because we don't really experience winter in terms of averages. We do in terms of the extremes. So we can have relatively cold winters like last year where we don't get to very many extreme cold temperatures, or we could have winters like a few years ago where it was actually pretty mild throughout much of the winter, but then we had one or two extremely cold outbreaks. So yeah, so I think the big thing for winter that I'm looking for is wetter conditions, active storm track, and hopefully recharging that soil moisture.
Thanks, Trent. Great to hear from you.
Yeah, always great to talk with you, Caesar. Have a good rest of the fall, and hopefully we'll talk to you soon.
Brentford State Climatology in Champaign on Back Roads of Illinois. And counting on the beans markets with John Heinberg from Total Farm Marketing. John, how are you?
We're doing well, doing well. Hoping our brewers can find a way to claw out of this 2-0 hole that we got ourselves in. But overall, though, doing really well.
John, let's start with our conversation about the news from China with beans markets. Do you have any concerns about these issues for right now?
Well, there's always concerns out there. Obviously, you still got a lot of volatility in the marketplace. This week, it's really kind of seemed to ramp up on the chatter between both countries, both good and bad. Market responded a little bit today to the possibility of extending the tariff deadline that we have with them. That's coming up here in November. So that's some of the reason I think we saw a little bit of buying in the grains today, just kind of triggering some technical buying in that regard. There's a lot of things that are going on right now between the rare earth minerals as well as technology, computer chips, things, everything along those lines that are so part of this process. And it's not just soybeans. So it'll be interesting to see how things kind of play out as we get into the end of the month and this right now, at least potential meeting between President Trump and President Xi. Maybe the market's feeling like maybe we can get something put together and at least get some beans moving to their shores and help out some of this demand pile that we're a little concerned about.
What is the fundamentals on the beans futures, John?
Well, the one thing that's really strong, and we saw it yesterday, NOPA crush numbers in terms of the soybean crush, 197 million bushels yesterday, above expectations. And we're going to need that if we continue to not have business go the Chinese route through the export sale. We got to use things more domestically in that regard. Now, still the crush is going to be the biggest portion of usage for soybeans. Possibly about, according to the last balance sheets, about 58% of soybean usage here in the United States is going to be in the crush side of the equation. So that's still the area that could be the silver lining as we continue to use beans here domestically. But one thing we'll have to watch, though, too, like maybe this market's changing. Maybe we're not going to be an exporter of soybeans so much, but maybe the exporter of soybean meal as we continue this record crush. We got meal product that needs to move. Maybe that's one way we get these beans out of the country is we crush them, get the oil, and then ship out the meal. So those are some things to kind of watch going forward here. But at least right now, the fundamental picture is still very questionable. Still waiting on to see if we get something put together with the Chinese.
What is the fundamentals on the beans future? What is your thoughts on the corn markets for fundamentals with the trade to Mexico?
Mexico continues to be a bit of a savior in the corn market here as they've been buying aggressively again to start the marketing year. Some of that's probably tied to the fact that they've got a lot of our cattle down there with the feeder cattle ban still being in place. And so they need feed supplies in order to handle that. So with that, the corn market based fundamentals, again, we still got a lot of corn out there. We get picked up 200 million bushels of old crop supply on the grain stocks report. We've added 4 million acres of corn to the harvest pile. I'm a little concerned in the front end. Even today, we'll have to see if we can get some follow through after a pretty good price day today in December corn. But we ran into resistance, and you could just kind of see this market stop there around that 422 window. Prices kind of need to hold here or possibly push through, and then maybe get a little bit more upside. But with that, again, harvest is still ramping up. We probably got about 60% of the harvest left to go. It's going to be a lot of bushels hitting the pipeline. Wouldn't be shocked that we see this market soften back up again, at least between now and the first of the year, as we just try to find a home for all these bushels of corn, soybeans. We already got wheat, we got sorghum. There's just a lot of grain production here in the United States as we move into the winter months.
How about the technical buying from the corn markets?
Yeah, we've seen that kind of happen this week. We put that low in around 410, 411 a couple days ago. We held a pretty good line of support there, and then you've seen the money kind of push back into this market. Now, unfortunately, we're back to the top of that range at this 422 spot. So, like I just said, tomorrow could be a very key day. If we can get through here, maybe we can push it up into that 430, 431 area. Then I got another trend line weighing over the markets there. 200-day moving average on December corn is about 438. So there's a couple upside resistance points that this market could happen to break out here. Now, if we come back tomorrow and we got a negative day again, we're probably going to go back down and challenge that 410 window. We'll have to see if that can hold. There are a couple things that concern me. We're taking carry out of the market a little bit right here. September closed at 399. And we've actually gained bushels into the pile with that grain stocks report after September close. So I'm a little concerned that, if things get kind of ugly in terms of money flow, that corn has the possibility to go back, re-challenge that 392 level. But wouldn't surprise me given the harvest that's going on. And then things shake out as we move into 26.
How is the reflection on the farmers' bailout?
Obviously, we're still trying to figure out what the program is going to be. I continue to hear just little tidbits coming out. Obviously, we're not going to see anything until the government shutdown is over, and that might not get done now until maybe into the middle of November. At least that's what some prediction centers are saying. Again, bailouts are what they are. Obviously helps the balance sheet, but then it adds free money into the economy. That keeps those input costs up, things of that nature. So there's a mixed feeling on those bailouts from some producers. Some like them, some don't. It'd be nice if the free market would just go ahead and trade itself where it needs to, and we wouldn't have to worry about bailouts. But obviously, if things are tight, especially in that soybean market, like we've seen here in terms of lack of profitability and maybe tied to the trade wars, maybe not. This selling off started back in the previous administration. So with that, it is what it is, and we just kind of go from there with it. Yes, that's money in the checkbook, but at the same time, there's still some longer term ramifications that usually come in the form of higher inflation, higher input costs, as that's just how it works in the economic system.
Do you recommend for farmers to the commodities markets, especially in uncertainty within the grains markets, John?
There's a lot of things going on in these markets right now, and I know a lot of people want to be bullish this market. But I'm always concerned about the downside and things of that nature. Now, if you're making sales and you have to move bushels off the combine, got to keep the bins moving a little bit here. You want to keep some re-ownership in, either call strategies, longer term, maybe even owning the futures, things of that nature. Let's get out into the first part of 2026 and those strategies for corn and soybeans. just in case this yield isn't where it is, or the demand continues to stay hot, or China comes back into that soybean market. Let's make sure we got something out there to at least maybe reward you if this market does find some really good footing. Now, if you're going to be storing bushels out there, I'm a little worried about the carry disappearing with the big supply picture. Puts are cheap right now. Put a floor underneath your bin. Don't spend a lot to do it. And let's let your bushels be the upside move in the marketplace. Let's, and hope we're wrong with that put. And we can get a nice rally to get some good price on some of these bushels, but at least have some type of a floor underneath in this area. I know prices don't look like they can go lower, but sometimes we've thought that, and the market does find its way. So again, that's kind of my recommendations. Talking to people right now, each individual person's different in their thought process. But again, if you got questions, feel free to reach out to your elevator or somebody like myself. Just look at the ideas and the tools that are out there for you.
What is the technical buying of the cattle markets, John?
Well, we've seen a lot of buying in this cattle market here the last couple of weeks. First off, some of the fundals are just fun.
Do you have any final thoughts on the harvest season?
Harvest has been rolling along pretty good. Now we've seen some wetness this week, so that's slowed things down a little bit in that regard. Bean harvest has moved at a pretty strong clip. A lot of producers are done or nearly done with the beans that I've talked to, just because the weather was so friendly in terms of warm and dry. Now they're into the corn harvest, a little bit slower pace going there, but again, still a lot to get done in the final 2/3 of harvest is still out there. Yields at this time frame been, on beans seem to be holding in there. Corn, a lot of variability.
Thanks, John. It's been a ride with Cubs and Brewers.
Thank you, sir. Thanks, Cesar. Have yourself a great day. Go Brewers. Go Packers.
John Heinberg from Total Farm Marketing.